Hey guys, tonight we're winding things way down. So if you've been carrying the weight of the day on your shoulders, go ahead and set it aside. Dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's drift back, way back, to a world where the smell of wood smoke never fully washed off, wool itched constantly, and the concept of personal space was something only nobles daydreamed about. Yes, we're spending the night with medieval peasants. Not literally, of course. Those houses were tiny, and trust me, you don't want to get that close to a 13th century foot. But we are settling in for a long, slow, mildly tragic, but strangely cozy glide through what life actually looked like for the average person in medieval Europe. The people who didn't write chronicles, the people who didn't sit on thrones, the people who mostly sat on mud. So let's exhale, unclench the jaw, and step into a day in the life of a medieval peasant, long before coffee, deodorant, or the idea that children shouldn't be operating heavy livestock equipment. Just a soft reminder, there will be no dramatic drum rolls, no heroic battles, no sudden twists where the plowboy turns out to be heir to the kingdom, because peasants did not get plot twists. They got chores. Endless, circular, Sisyphean chores. And that's what makes tonight's story perfect for falling asleep to. Nothing happens quickly. Everything is a little bleak, and much like your 8 a.m. alarm tomorrow morning, medieval life just keeps going. The morning that begins before morning exists. Let's float gently into the early hours, somewhere around 4 a.m., because medieval peasants were out here waking up before birds even remembered they had vocal cords. Picture this: a one-room house, walls made of wattle and daub, basically sticks and mud pretending to be architecture. A roof that leaks in exactly 3 places, but never the same 3, and air quality that could politely be described as smoke-flavored. Medieval peasants weren't waking up slowly or gracefully. They were waking up because the fire had burned low, the cold was biting, or a chicken had decided that personal boundaries were a myth. And yes, entire families slept together. Kids, parents, maybe a grandparent, possibly the dog, and if your life was going well, a neighbor borrowing floor space for just a few days that became 3 months. Forget king-size bed. This was more like communal hay pile, slightly damp at the edges. Our peasant probably starts the day by stretching in that stiff, resigned way of someone who hasn't had a soft mattress in their entire genetic lineage. Then it's time for the morning routine, which, I should warn you, does not include showering. Medieval peasants bathed when the church allowed it. There was enough warm weather, the water didn't look too frog-infused, and the moon was in the right emotional state. So rarely. Their version of freshening up was splashing a handful of cold water on the face and pretending that counted. To be fair, in that climate, anything more ambitious might literally kill you. But the first real task of the morning was rekindling the fire. Fire was life. Fire was warmth, cooking, light, morale, everything. A medieval peasant would sooner lose a sibling than let the hearth go out. Probably. So, our peasant pokes at last night's ashes like a sleep-deprived dragon, hoarding embers, and uses whatever scraps of kindling they can find, dried moss, bits of straw, broken twigs, half the broom, to get a flame going. All of this happens while the rest of the household is slowly coming to life. Kids are rubbing their eyes, animals are beginning their daily audition for loudest creature alive. Someone is coughing in a way that sounds suspiciously like untreated tuberculosis. Just medieval ambiance. Breakfast. A master class in being underwhelmed. Modern breakfast has options: cereal, smoothies, pancakes, eggs. Peasants, they get pottage. Pottage is, well, imagine oatmeal. But if oatmeal had given up hope, a lukewarm, stewy sludge made from whatever grains were left, sometimes beans, sometimes leeks, occasionally sadness. It simmered on the fire all day, every day, and new ingredients were dumped in whenever available. It was like a medieval eternal soup, but blander. In richer moments, they might have bread. Bread was a big deal. Rustic, heavy, often full of unintentional extras like millstone grit or the occasional insect. If your teeth survived medieval bread, congratulations, you were basically a superhero. They also drank ale. Yes, at breakfast. No, it wasn't a party. Water was unsafe and ale was safer. Barely. It was low alcohol, weak, cloudy, and tasted roughly like barley that had existential depression. But it kept people hydrated. Sort of. Medieval hydration was an ongoing negotiation with fate. Breakfast was eaten while standing or sitting on stools that looked like they were one sneeze away from collapsing. Conversation was minimal. Everyone was already tired because medieval life ran on the fuel of exhaustion and obligation. Heading out into the world, or a world made of mud. After breakfast, our peasant steps outside and immediately their feet are wet. Why? Because medieval Europe was mud. Everywhere. All the time. Roads were optional, drainage was a myth, and medieval shoes, let's just say they were more suggestion of footwear than functional protection. So now we're walking to the fields in shoes that are basically leather pancakes, hoping the frost bites only 3 of our toes, not 4. The village itself is coming alive in that mellow, chaotic way small communities do. A few roosters are crowing like they're being paid by the decibel. Smoke is curling out of chimneys. Someone's goat is already trying to escape because goats are just medieval agents of chaos. Our peasant nods to neighbors. There's no privacy here. Everyone knows everything. And if they don't, they'll ask aggressively until they do. The medieval world had no sense of maybe that's personal. If you burned your pottage last night, 10 people will know by sunrise. And then you have problems. But the good news, no one has time for gossip because the fields are calling. And by calling, I mean they loom with the omnipresent threat of famine if neglected. Work begins, or the endless quest to coexist with dirt. Fieldwork is the central truth of peasant life. You plant, you weed, you pray, you watch the sky like it owes you money. Every peasant was essentially a meteorologist, soil scientist, agricultural theorist, and beast of burden wrangler, rolled into one, unpaid, underfed, and occasionally yelled at by a lord who had never actually done a day of fieldwork in his life. Today's tasks depend on the season. Spring, plowing, sowing, frantic optimism. Summer, endless weeding, worrying, praying the weather cooperates. Autumn, frantic harvesting, more worrying. Winter, repairing tools, mending clothes, quietly regretting your life choices. Let's say we're in late spring. The ground is soft, the days are long, and morale is somewhere between acceptable and quietly suffering. Our peasant grabs a wooden-handled tool that weighs as much as emotional baggage and starts scraping at the earth. It's not glamorous work. It's not even mildly interesting, but it's necessary. You work until your muscles burn, then you keep working because no one invented weekends yet, or coffee breaks, or basic workers' rights. Your companions are a plow, a couple of oxen who resents everything, and maybe your neighbor who tells you about his cousin's third wife's toothache. It's riveting stuff. A quick break that isn't really a break. Around midday, around mid-morning, peasants stop for a small pause. Not a break. Breaks imply rest. This is more like attempt to keep from passing out. They might nibble on yesterday's crust of bread or take a sip of ale that's been sitting in a wooden flask since dawn. If they're lucky, there's cheese. If they're unlucky, the cheese is moving. Either way, they eat it. Protein is protein. No one sits down. If you sit down, you may never get back up. Your muscles will think it's bedtime. And if you fall asleep in a field, the Lord will notice your productivity dip by 0.0003%, and then you have problems. So the break is quick, efficient, barely restorative, perfect for a slow, sleepy narrative. Back to work, the afternoon grind. By midday, our peasant is in full autopilot mode. Their brain has shut off all unnecessary functions. Just breathe, hoe, step, breathe, hoe. Wonder if God intended humans to live like this. Hoe. The sun is high, clothes are itchy, and sweat is unavoidable. Deodorant? Not invented. Showers? We've discussed this. So everyone smells earthy. Very earthy. But the human nose adapts. Eventually, you don't smell the sweat, the animals, or the damp wool. You just smell medieval, which is a polite way of saying, don't think too hard about it. The afternoon passes in a slow, plodding rhythm, perfect for lulling you into sleep. Nothing exciting happens. Someone might yawn, someone might sneeze because pollen has been an enemy of humanity since time began. Someone's ox may wander off to eat flowers. That's about as dramatic as it gets.